Pakistan has carried out strikes on 7 terrorist camps and hideouts along the Pakistan-Afghanistan border, targeting groups identified as Fitna al-Khawarij, a term used by the state for the banned Tehreek-i-Taliban Pakistan and its affiliates, as well as Islamic State-Khorasan province. According to the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting, the action followed recent suicide bombings, including an attack at an Imam Bargah in Islamabad and incidents in Bajaur and Bannu during the holy month of Ramazan. The government said it had conclusive evidence that the attacks were carried out on the behest of Afghanistan-based leadership and described the strikes as a retributive intelligence-based operation. Islamabad has repeatedly urged the Afghan Taliban administration to prevent militant groups from using Afghan territory, saying those appeals have not resulted in substantive action. The latest escalation comes amid a resurgence in militancy since the Taliban's return to power in Kabul in 2021. A February 16 vehicle-borne suicide attack in Bajaur killed 11 Pakistani soldiers along with a young girl and injured several civilians after militant rammed an explosive-laden vehicle into a security post. Another attack in Bannu killed a lieutenant colonel and a support. Pakistani officials maintain that militants are operating from Afghan soil. Previous cross-border tensions, including reported strikes and clashes in late 2025, have further strained relations. Separately, developments in Washington have drawn diplomatic attention after a guilty plea in a New York court linked to a murder targeting Sikh activist Gurpatwant Singh Pannoon. Nikhil Gupta admitted to charges including conspiracy to commit murder for hire and money laundering and now faces a potential sentence of up to 40 years. Pakistan says the case vindicates its long-standing position that India sponsors extraterritorial actions against citizens. A U.S. Department of Justice statement said the plot was initiated by an Indian government employee, while investigators described Gupta as acting under that direction. Observers know the conviction raises wider diplomatic and intelligence questions but does not yet resolve issues of state responsibility. Analysts expect the case to influence intelligence cooperation and law enforcement coordination rather than trigger immediate sanctions or a rupture in relations. On the Middle East front, Pakistan joined 13 other countries in condemning remarks by the U.S. ambassador to Israel suggesting he would not oppose Israel taking over large parts of the region. The comments were made during an interview in which he referred to biblical descriptions of Israel's borders. In a joint statement, foreign ministers from multiple Muslim-majority nations along with regional organizations expressed profound concern, calling the remarks dangerous, inflammatory, and a violation of international law and the United Nations Charter. The statement reiterated rejection of any annexation attempts, opposed settlement expansion in the occupied Palestinian territory, and reaffirmed support for Palestinian self-determination and the establishment of an independent state along the June 4, 1967 lines. Pakistan's Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif also addressed the Gaza situation during his participation in the inaugural Board of Peace meeting in Washington convened by U.S. President Donald Trump. After the meeting, he traveled to London for a brief stay before returning to Pakistan. At the gathering, the Prime Minister called for an end to ceasefire violations in Gaza, stressing that adherence to the ceasefire was essential for lasting peace, protection of lives, and reconstruction. He emphasized that Palestinians must exercise full control over their land and future in line with U.S. Security Council resolutions and urged a credible pathway to an independent and sovereign Palestinian state. Meanwhile, at the United Nations, Pakistan warned that a deepening liquidity crisis is undermining global peacekeeping operations. Ambassador Asim Iftikhar said funding shortages are affecting mandate implementation, civilian protection, deterrence of violence, and the safety of peacekeepers. The warning echoed earlier concerns that the UN could face financial collapse unless member states pay dues on time or budget rules are reformed. Pakistan highlighted its own long-standing contributions, noting that more than 250,000 Pakistanis have served in 48 UN missions over 6 decades. Pakistan also reiterated opposition to expanding permanent membership of the UN Security Council, arguing that adding new permanent seats would worsen dissatisfaction and violate the principle of sovereign equality. As part of the Uniting for Consensus group, Pakistan advocates expanding only non-permanent elected seats to improve representation.
And I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Pakistan.
Thank you. Co-chairs, Pakistan aligns itself with the statement delivered by Italy on behalf of the Uniting for Consensus group. Co-chairs, of the 5 interlinked clusters, the categories of membership is the one that is farthest from convergence. Evidently, this has been the main stumbling block to reform. A fair, equitable, and feasible compromise will need to be found in order to overcome this impasse. And many of the questions that you coaches have posed in your letter of 12th February and this morning also have their answers in a compromise, a middle ground that is fair and equitable for all, and that is practical and realistic and thus feasible. Such a compromise must also correspond to the agreed principles of reform. Enhanced representation should be democratic, more transparent, accountable, effective. We know all that. But are these mere words? Because if we are serious about these principles, we should put to test each of the various reform models against those principles and see how they perform. And here we see that the demand for individual permanent membership is clearly something that runs counter to these principles of reform. It simply fails to meet the test. And in particular, it violates the principle of sovereign equality, and therefore cannot be a basis for reform governed by those agreed principles. Then we also need to learn from the actual practice of the Council over the decades. We know what ails the Council, what is the root cause of the challenges facing the Council. The overwhelming majority of the UN membership recognizes that permanent membership and the veto are at the core of the Council's paralysis and inaction that we have witnessed too often over the years. For them, this is not a peripheral concern, it is the central fault line that undermines the Council's credibility and effectiveness. Where so much effort has gone into this reform debate, and at a time when multilateral system is under extreme stress, with calls for reform for a UN that is fit for purpose, the demand for special privileges must have no space in these discussions. Pakistan's position has been consistent and clear. New permanent members will not neutralize the inordinate influence of the existing permanent members. Rather, they risk entrenching and expanding it. Two wrongs cannot make a right, and a larger oligarchy is no antidote to an elite power club. The circle of permanence, even though expanded, will remain a closed circle. And no wonder some of the P5 are happy to expand this club primarily to protect their own outdated status in today's council. Chairs, we believe that the best way to balance the unequal power of the five is through a more democratic and accountable approach, including a meaningful increase in elected non-permanent members. This would shift the internal balance of an expanded council in favor of the wider membership and ensure that the required majority for the adoption of resolutions rests predominantly with elected members, thereby enhancing transparency, inclusivity, and accountability in the Council's decision-making process while preserving the principle of sovereign equality. Now, there is the African common position, which we fully respect and understand. And my delegation has consistently stated that Africa's demand for permanent seats is on behalf of and for the entire region, and is therefore fundamentally different from other proposals that are divisive as they seek permanent membership for individual states. Co-chairs, coming to the concept of longer-term fixed regional seats, we acknowledge and appreciate your constructive efforts to bridge the differences between various positions. This proposal, in essence, as we understand, confirms that the demand for new permanent members is not feasible, and that a middle ground needs to be explored based on a combination of medium terms, re-election and rotation for the seats allocated to the regions. Now, this is an interesting proposal, and any fresh ideas aimed at breaking the deadlock merit consideration. It would be useful to have more details on the various aspects of this proposal. A key consideration for us is that no proposal should evolve into de facto permanence, as it will not be in the interest of the wider membership. And we continue to believe that expansion of veto is neither desirable nor feasible. Any concept, in our view, must ensure genuine rotation and fair regional representation. That is possible only with a reasonable expansion in elected non-permanent, longer-term and regular 2-year seats to cater to underrepresented regions and to accommodate the interests of sub-regional and cross-regional groups, including the SIDS and the OIC, as also provided for and agreed in the Pact for the Future. Now, some colleagues have been harping on the claim of so-called majority for a particular position. So my question is, if that were the case, what are we doing here? So let's be realistic. Flexibility is the key word here, and we have heard a lot that word this morning. Yet, there are others who remain fixated. They don't move at all while calling for negotiations. Simply put, convergences that have to be the basis for a so-called consolidated model cannot be achieved without flexibility. So, co-chairs, my delegation stands ready in the spirit of flexibility to work constructively with you and with all members in pursuit of a genuine reform. A reform for all, privilege for none. Thank you.